Welcome to the Tech Room podcast. My name is David Rogoski, and I'm a partner at Tech 387. And I am delighted to have join me Jeff Wallace, who is the owner of Silicon Valley in your pocket. Welcome, Jeff. It's great to see you. It's been a while.
Thank you, David. It sure has. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So we just want to have a conversation with you to hear about, you've had an interesting life. You've had a lot of success in entrepreneurship and investing. And so we just want to hear your experience and share it with our audience. And so I'd love to just start off by turning the call over to you and just hearing more about your background and your story, and we can go from there.
That sounds great. Yeah, I guess I will start with, I grew up on the East Coast of the US in the New York area. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, grew up in New Jersey mostly, and I went to school for undergraduate university at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And I studied economics and finance. I ended up going into Wall Street. That was my beginning of my career, was after school. I started my career on Wall Street. I was there for about 3 years when I decided I wanted to get another degree, an MBA. And I thought, since I'd done everything in the East Coast, that I would give the West Coast a try for 2 years. And I ended up going to Berkeley for my MBA. The 2-year part didn't quite work out the way I had envisioned it. I am still in Silicon Valley for the most part, based out of Silicon Valley, and that's 34 plus years ago. So much for my 2-year plan. But I still have family back east. I get back east periodically to visit with my family and friends. But I just really fell in love with the Bay Area. I think there's something different in the air out in the Bay Area in terms of entrepreneurship and kind of the whole startup scene. But in reality, I started my career after my MBA in management consulting. So I started working for a large consultancy similar to McKinsey or one of the bigger names like Boston Consulting Group. It was called CSC Index. It was owned by a large entity called Computer Science Corp, hence the CSC. And we consulted mostly Fortune 500 companies, typically in the C-suite. So it was a large, opportunity to work with large organizations. And I absolutely loved the consulting side of things because I got to see so many different businesses and learn so much about different industries. But about 4 and some years into my career, somebody kind of jokingly said to me, those who can do, those who cannot consult. Of course, I was a consultant on the team, so I was like, hang on a minute, I can do. And so that kind of triggered my thought process to go do stuff. And I realized there was some truth to the statement, even though it was said in jest, that consultants oftentimes, kind of come up with a strategy, come up with a plan, and kind of hand the playbook to a client in hopes that the implementation goes well, but they don't always go well. And so I thought, maybe I'm going to go try and do something. And so in the mid-90s, I started what's become a almost 3-decade-long serial entrepreneurial journey. And I've had several businesses throughout my years, some that have been had good outcomes and some that have had absolutely abysmal outcomes in terms of financially and what I had hoped the outcomes to be. But even those that didn't have the best outcome still gave me amazing experiences and amazing parts of my own journey. The example I would give you is I got to work with both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. That's not a normal thing. But as part of my entrepreneurial journey, I got to work with Steve Jobs in the late 90s. And then fast forward to 2010s, I joined the speaking circuit on startups and technology and things like that. And I've gotten to work a few times with Steve Wozniak. So even things that didn't work out for me as a startup founder still gave me kind of indelible experiences that have helped shape my own views, my experiences within the startup ecosystem or the tech ecosystem.
So you grew up in Jersey, went to school, business, got your MBA, and just had that general interest in business, had an opportunity to do some consulting, and just like any one of us most of us coming out of university, we don't necessarily know exactly what we want to do. We just go out there and try things, and exactly what you did. And I find it interesting that it was, a comment that was made by a colleague that really like resonated with you and really it hit you because it actually, prompted you to really think about what you're doing and possibly change directions. So I'd love to you've got so many stories to tell, but I'd love to kind of start with where you, when you were in that moment, like what was your thought process, and like what was like the next outcome, like first opportunity that you pursued?
And you're absolutely right. I mean, that was definitely kind of one of those moments in life where something just triggered a change in direction for me professionally. What it led to was probably within a few short months, I resigned from the consulting company and I jumped into the entrepreneurial waters. I began with a startup in the tech sector. It was helping people, and this was well before any of the technology we're familiar with today. So this sounds almost crazy to talk about it now because it's such a different world we're in. But it was where we were trying to connect people to be able to communicate over this new thing called the internet. And it really, I mean that like sincerely, it was truly, the internet really emerged in 94 and I started in this business in 95. Like I was very early on and people were trying to figure out, what does this internet thing mean for us? What can we do with these new kind of tools that are available to us? And so it was a technology that allowed for people to communicate, similar to what we're doing over video and audio here, but to just be able to communicate with others around the globe who are also able to get connected to the internet. And that led to, I stayed in that business. It raised some capital. That got me into the early understanding of how to go about putting the documents together to raise the capital from investors, be they angel. We raised from angels. We also raised from institutional. But I also ended up clashing with the founders of that business. There were some things that I wasn't comfortable with in the way they were conducting themselves and the way they were conducting the business. And so I ended up leaving the business, but I was already embedded in my brain to find ways of using this communication capability that the internet brought. And so with two colleagues, we started a software business called educationtalk.com. And it was around connecting students in the K-12 side of things who needed, tutoring and assistance in academics to certified teachers on the other end who needed extra income. And so this allowed everyone, again, I'm going back to 96. So this is a long time, right? Almost 30 years ago now, 28 years back. But it was allowing educators and students to have that experience in the safety of their own home. And interestingly enough, we did a 70-30 split on the rate. So it's kind of become the App Store split model. We did a 70-30 split. We told educators, you charge whatever you want to charge. We'll keep 30%. You get 70%. These were all background screened, certified educators in the subject matter that they were coming into our platform to tutor in. So it really was an exciting experience. Again, we went into the fundraising mode and selling mode because we actually were delivering. We had partnered with a number of schools and even tutoring centers at colleges, particularly community colleges. So it was an exciting time. Ultimately, we built that product on top of Apple QuickTime. And so I had said to my partners, I said, we should be like embedded on the Mac platform, even though it's cross-platform because they had QuickTime for Windows. So we were a cross-platform, basically Zoom. What you and I are using right here, David, is what we built in 1996. And I said to my partners, we should be embedded on the Mac platform. They kind of laughed and said, well, that's like a Steve Jobs decision. This was after Steve had now returned to Apple, having gone away and done Next. And then he came back to Apple. And I said, well, then let's go talk to him. And they thought, well, you're nuts. Like now you're just crazy. And a few weeks later, I had scheduled a meeting with Steve Jobs and Phil Schiller, who was at the time as the head of all products for Apple. And we got a partnership going with Apple. They were very education oriented. We were using Apple technology. So there was a lot of reason that that kind of an opportunity came together. But unfortunately, by the time all of that partnership did come together, we were into 99. And if you go back and remember those years, 99 began the slide in the wrong direction for the kind of the tech market. And we were one of those companies that, despite having a lot of very positive progress, fundraising wasn't happening at the pace we needed it to sustain our business. And ultimately, I had to shut the business with my business partners. But I'm still in partnership with my two business partners from that era in two separate businesses now. So those relationships that were forged back then and the joint experience that we had has been, very durable. Because here I am, and there were three of us, and I'm in business with each of those two partners in separate businesses now. Like I said, almost 28 years later.
That's amazing, and I can try to imagine back in those days, even just setting up like the payment arrangement between the parties was probably a major challenge. Like it's not like today.
No Stripe or PayPal,
right?
None of it existed. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So and to think about, like I was alive back then, and all of social interaction was done either in person or over the telephone. So it was very rarely. I mean, this was like cutting edge stuff, like having, you have the teachers like on camera, like teaching the kids. That must have been a really exciting thing. And I also, yeah. So it was, and it's interesting how that we see this a lot with entrepreneurs that we work with. Is you just go out and you dip your foot in the pool, you take some action, you do something, and it just usually leads to something else, which for you led to a partnership with Apple, because you're trying to think about how to optimize the video quality, the communication quality, and probably some other things as well. And it's just really amazing that worked out like that.
We were delivering, and I'm talking in that day and age, we were on DSL. So internet was not nearly at the robust speeds that we have today. We were delivering 30 frame per second video. So we had some excellent software done by much brighter people in my company than me. I'm not a tech guy, who were able to create codecs to compress the video and audio such that we were able to get 30 frames per second on DSL technology. When I got to Apple and was at an event at Apple, and I was able to raise my hand and ask a question of Steve Jobs, which ultimately led to an email exchange between him and I. He said to me in the first email he wrote to me in response to my outreach after that event, he said, well, my engineers say it would need to do this and this and this. And it was very pithy, very short response he gave to my email. And I hit reply and I said, your engineers are wrong. I'm happy to show it to you. Let me know if you're interested. And I hit send. And I thought, oh, I'll probably not hear back now, but I gave it my best. And he writes back, he says, well, it would need to do this and this at a minimum, they tell me. And I said, they're still wrong, and I'm still happy to show it to you. And his next message was, when can you come in? And immediately we got on schedule and went in and did a demo for him. And I had asked him to bring Phil Schiller, who was the product lead, which he graciously did. And then it led to a collaboration. Unfortunately, the market became our enemy at that time. And unbeknownst to us, it led to within 7 or 8 months, we had to shut the business down just because we couldn't sustain it financially. But, to be able to have had that experience, I don't look at that as a failure. I look at it as an amazing experience. And, timing was what it was. I definitely learned the lesson of don't be too far ahead of the market, because the market really wasn't ready for this kind of stuff in 99, like we were delivering. Even though we were delivering it, the market wasn't prepared. Most households, many of them were still on dial-up, didn't have DSL. Maybe DSL was in a certain double-digit penetration rate, but nothing like what internet is now. And so, there were some very valuable lessons learned, and it was a great experience, although financially it was, nowhere near what we had hoped for, obviously.
Yeah, timing is definitely important in the technology space. But I got to say, before I comment on that it takes a lot of courage. Steve Jobs back then was still a pretty well-known guy. I mean, he was big even back then. And so to have the courage to, first of all, send him an email at all, and then reply with such confidence that his engineers, one of the most brilliant engineering team in the world probably, is wrong, and that you would show him, and to do that twice, that took some serious courage and just an amazing story. For entrepreneurs out there, like just having that confidence in what you do is so critical. And you're right. So in the technology space, since you need funding to build the technology, if the technology is too early, it requires a significant amount of more funding and cash reserves to survive until you can get some traction. And then on top of that, you sort of had a double whammy. So, in 99, entering the 2000, we hit the tech bubble, the internet bubble, and stock market crashes. VC money dries up. Sounds like it was drying up already before then. And then that's what happened. So
you're absolutely right. I appreciate the comment that it took courage. To me, I had the confidence because I had a technology that the team that we had, and it was a small team, they delivered. I mean, I had the confidence because we had the goods to back up my confidence. And the proof is in the pudding. When I went into the meeting with Steve and Phil Schiller, we came out of that meeting with a partnership. I mean, they saw the benefit of what we were doing. I think they recognize, wow, these guys have done something that hasn't been done yet. And we truly had. So it was, but you're right. I mean, there were a lot of people that said to me, when I said we need to go partner with Apple, and they said, well, that's a Steve Jobs decision. I said, let's go talk to him. There were a lot of people that said, you're nuts. Like, what do you mean, let's go talk to him? Like, who the hell are you? And I said, who the hell am I not? Like, why can't I reach out to him? Like, somebody's going to reach out to him. It may as well be me. So I just never had the, as I would say, I don't apply brakes to myself. Like, I try to be very thoughtful and professional and all that good stuff, but I do not put the obstacle in front of myself. I do find most founders put the obstacles in front of themselves, and it's their own self-doing, because it's an artificial obstacle that you put there on your own. I just don't have that. I don't have the kind of the thought process that says, well, I can't reach out to Steve Jobs. He's Steve Jobs. Like, my attitude is, hell yeah, I can reach out to Steve Jobs. And if I'm blessed enough and fortunate enough that he responds, that's all the better.
I love it. That is such a inspiring story. I love that so much. And like you said, this wasn't a failure. This was a tremendous learning experience. Like, just the connections that you developed, the experience that you got in starting and running a business. Just immeasurable, and now, like you said, some of the relationships you developed back then you're still your business partners today. So there you are. So the .com bubble hits. You can't get any more capital. What happens from there?
It's a very interesting twist in my career. So I went to visit a friend, a well-off friend from the insurance industry. He had sold a business for close to 9 figures. And he had some property down in Mexico. And he had a friend, we had a mutual friend who was a very successful home builder in Redmond, Washington. You might know what else is in Redmond, Washington. This home builder built a lot of the very wealthy Microsoft homes in that era. This was in 2000, so right at the cusp of 2000. And I went down to Mexico to visit my friend at his place, and I was kind of in I'll say less than ecstatic way, because I'm just coming out of the .com bubble burst. I thought we had an opportunity, and I'm really a little bit depressed almost. And he says, yeah, come on down. We'll hang out and we'll just kind of talk. And he says, Jim is coming down. Jim was the home builder. And so Jim and I, drove down together from Arizona. It was in northern Mexico, just below Arizona and the border there. And we were sitting on my colleague's, deck on the beach. And you look one way and there's just a person in the distance walking a dog. You look the other direction, there's a couple holding hands walking with their feet in the water. And I just thought to myself, God, this is an amazing place. How did you ever find this place? And he tells me how he got there. Well, I would say we were commiserating, but I was the only miserable one of the three of us. And so I was miserating while they were hanging out trying to cheer me up. Well, by the end of the weekend, the suggestion had come up, I know what your next business should be. I said, what should my next business be? They said, we should buy beachfront property and build a resort here. Now, that came from the home builder. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, I know nothing about construction. It's in Mexico. It's different laws, different language, different currency. Like, in a business I know nothing about. What are you talking about? And he said, yeah, I think we should do it. I think you should move down here. We'll buy some land. I'll help out with all the construction side of things with my team. And 3 weeks later, we bought 15 acres of oceanfront with their money. And I became the operating CEO of the business. And I brought in a colleague of mine who had gone to graduate school with me and had lived in Mexico City. He understood, doing business in Mexico. And we were off to the races. The next 4 years, we built a very, very high-end luxury beach resort. We built about 220 properties. And it was the only business I've ever been involved in to this day, including everything that came past it, where no matter what forecast we estimated our revenues would be, we were wrong on the low end.
Wow.
It just never had that happen. Thought it was nuts that it was happening that way. But one of the things that happened in that era, again, if you think back in history, 9/11 happened in September of 2001.
Mm-hmm.
People became very fearful of flying overseas for completely understandable reasons. But that put a massive spike in the demand for our beachfront luxury resort in a drivable 3-hour drive from Phoenix or Tucson, Arizona. And so we had people literally outbidding one another to buy our properties. And so, in fact, we changed the architecture and we added a few floors to one of the high rises. We had 5 high rises because we just had more demand than we were able to meet. And so, that was a very strange twist of my career. I would never have imagined being in real estate. I would never have imagined, being in another country. I lived down there for just about 4 years. And when we sold out, I was ready to come home and really get back to what I would call my passion of tech and strategy and marketing. Like, that's the stuff that gets me super excited. While real estate was a very successful business for me, my passion was, I got to get back and do tech.
Got it. So I'm just picturing this. You just finished up, with the prior company, didn't work out. You're in Mexico, kind of down in the dumps, meeting with a friend, and he brings Jim along, and you get to talking, and he's suggesting this idea in a foreign country, in an industry that you have no interest or experience in. I'm just curious, in that moment when you were all talking, what kind of prompted you to agree to try this?
Jim and the other gentlemen were both very successful guys. I am a believer that you're kind of that expression as it goes. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. These were 2 very successful business people in different businesses, one in the insurance space, one in the real estate or construction, real estate development and construction space. But I just thought, look, I'm coming out of a failed, venture. And I'm kind of licking my wounds, and here are these 2 really successful guys that are willing to take a shot on me. And it just felt like that was really humbling to me that they were willing to do that, and saw it that I would be the operating CEO. Like, they were the money guys for sure, and they were involved, but they were involved almost like advisors more than the direct day-to-day. And for them to allow me that opportunity, it was almost like, my balloon had burst and they were coming along saying, well, we could blow up another balloon for you. And I just felt like, wow, you're willing to put money in. You're hearing me tell you about my failed business. And here you are saying, yeah, that's okay. We know who you are. We understand the kind of person you are. And we're willing to take a shot with you. And emphasis on with, right? They took a shot with me. And for them to put me in that opportunity, it was humbling. And I just thought, you know what? If you're willing to take a shot on me, who am I to say no? I mean, I'm willing to do this. And it was a hardship in some cases. I was married. I used to joke that my wife up in the U.S. was pissed at me. My wife down in Mexico was pissed at me. Like, I used to have this joke that I was just spending not enough time in either place, but I was spending about 23, 24 days a month down in Mexico for 4 years. I mean, it was a long, journey, but it was a new business. I've never been afraid of the unknown or the ambiguous for me. I'm willing to just dive in the deep end of the pool and figure it out. And without any hesitancy, we did exactly that. I mean, I had to learn the business. I had to learn the culture of doing business in Mexico. I had to learn all sorts of things. And yet I came away from those 4 years with some amazing learning experiences as well. And what I realized there is, you have to focus on your team. I had a team of over 350 employees at one point, building this entire project from accounting and architecture to construction and all the various trades, et cetera. So it was a huge, huge team. And what I knew going back to my Wall Street beginnings, I had done some currency analysis. So I was very aware and very attuned to the difference between the peso and the dollar. And what I was noticing was we were a border town that operated mostly in dollars. So the US currency was the predominant currency in this particular border town, albeit it being in Mexico. We were a Mexican corporation with Mexican employees in Mexico, and I'm watching the peso devalue. Now, I'm probably the only person who's even thinking like that because I came from a Wall Street background having done that. And what I realized was this is negatively affecting my employees because they're actually having a lesser value of their pesos that we're paying them with. And so I contacted my accounting team in Mexico City, and I said, hey, is it possible for me to pay my employees in US dollars? And they were kind of like, what are you talking about? You're a Mexican corporation, et cetera. Why would you want to do that? And I explained to them why. And they said, Jeff, this is to your benefit. Why would you? This is the company is benefiting from this devaluation of the peso. And I said, yeah, but it's not a zero-sum game. It's on the backs of my employees, and they're getting negatively impacted by it. And they said, yeah, we don't recommend that. I said, I didn't ask you for your recommendation. I asked you if it's legal. Can I do it? So they did research. They wrote me a long paper on why it was a terrible idea to do it, with the final sentence being, but you can legally do it. And so I switched to currency, and I had to put a whole presentation together because I knew I was going to be under a little bit of, what the heck is happening here? What's he talking about? Kind of perspective. But at the end, that change ended up netting most of our employees north of 12% more in income, net income to themselves because of that switch. And it didn't come easy. They were mostly skeptical. I would say the vast majority were skeptical of, as the expression would have gone back then, the gringo is trying to screw us. That was kind of the attitude. And I understood it. I truly understood it. But I also understood more that they were being harmed and really didn't understand that side of it. And so I had my attorney standing side by side with me when I gave this presentation. I took questions from as many people as had them, and ultimately I switched to currency, and it was to the great benefit of the employees, which made me feel great. It came at the expense of the company, but it cost the company tens of thousands of dollars, and we did 110 plus million in revenue. So who cared? Like, it was a negligible difference to me, but a very meaningful difference to the employees. That was my big lesson, was if you take care of your people, your business is going to do fine. They'll take care of the business if you take care of them. And that was definitely a lesson that has persisted on for me, and it's formed a lot of my business attitudes since then.
I mean, that's so true in business. And what I really liked about this story is that you were aware that your employees weren't even going to understand that they were going to benefit from it, or at least not for a while. And you still did it anyway. I mean, like, that takes a lot of integrity, because, and so that's what I love about that story. And then so eventually they did realize it, and then now you've got, it's true, right? And then they're motivated. Then they trust you, they respect you. They're like, wow, this CEO, he's looking out for my benefit. Like, he's taking care of me. Like, I don't want to go anywhere else. I want to work for this. I want this company to keep growing. And that motivates people. And the like you said, for a couple of tens of thousands of dollars of investment, you're getting, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. You're getting an ROI on that that's almost immeasurable. And so it's such a great takeaway. Like, just, that alone, like you said, has probably made that whole experience worthwhile. Not to mention that you made incredible profits and, financially did well, and some of the other things. And it also shows you that the way you looked at this was like, these people, I can learn from these people. These people are very successful, very experienced. Even if I don't stay with this forever and it's not something that I'm passionate about, I'll at least give it a try. And I know that I can build a great network and learn a lot from these people. And so that is another important takeaway. And so I guess I could assume that you exited after 4 years or so, because at some point you had to spend all your time with your wife and you want to kind of jump back into the tech space and all that too, right? Is that fair to say?
I personally did exit. My three partners stayed on and continued on to other projects. I never looked back with anything other than it was an amazing experience for what it was, but I was ready to be back north of the border, I'll say, in that situation, and get back to the areas of passion. What I realized then was I'm not, there were a few things I learned. Being authentic and honest and having your employees' backs, your partners' backs, your business colleagues, having their backs and being in, as you use the word integrity, right? Operating with integrity and being authentic. It is, the payback is immense when people recognize that quality in you as a business person, whether you're their partner, their employee, whoever. And so that was an area where I really stood on principle of what I thought was the right thing to do for the people, even though they themselves didn't see it. And that was a big takeaway. And yeah, taking that opportunity, again, it's solidified in me that it doesn't matter what you throw me at, I'll figure it out. And it's the expression in the startup world where they say, give a B team an A idea and it'll fail. But give an A team a B idea and they'll make it succeed, right? I'd like to consider myself an A team member where I can figure it out. I'm humble enough to say what I don't know, and I'm humble also enough to go and find people who know it better than me. I'm never afraid of working with people significantly smarter than me and just bringing my assets to the table. Mine are just a small sliver of what's needed for a success of the business. And I'll always go and get the people around me. I'm a very good networker, and I will always be able to access the people who are smarter than me in the areas that I need them to be smarter than me in. And hopefully the assets that I bring are able to contribute to the overall outcome as well. So those were a few lessons that definitely got sharpened in those 4 years of understanding that, because I had to bring people in that understood construction and all those kinds of things. I was just a very strong generalist who figured out how to steer the ship and not derail it. I mean, we made mistakes for sure, but we knew how to, manage and operate when a mistake was made and figure out a pathway forward.
Right. Just not being afraid to fail. It's just iterating and iterating until you get it right, and you have that confidence, like you knew that you could figure it out, and that and look how successful it was. So yeah. So now you're in the mid 2000s, 2004, 2005. Sort of, you're back in the U.S. Take us from what happens here.
Towards the very end of that 2004 experience, that development experience in Mexico, we were kind of selling out. I was ready to go back north, didn't know what I was going to do. I'd been out of the game for a number of years now, which is not a good thing, right? I kind of had rust on me, if you will. And a colleague of mine from the consulting years in the early 90s after grad school, who lived in Sydney, Australia, we had become very close friends. Mostly through distance, because there wasn't a lot of opportunity to see each other in person, but we had. And he calls me up and says, hey, I'm applying for a job with an agency that works with McDonald's. They make the Happy Meal toys and put them in the boxes. They're one of 2 agencies in the world that do that. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of a cool, job, I guess. And I said, what can I do? He asked me to be a reference. So I became a reference for him. Long story short, he gets the job. And his first stint was to fly from Sydney up to Chicago, where McDonald's was headquartered. And he had to meet with the chief marketing officer to talk about digital. Now, back in the days of consulting, when he and I were at the same company, we were involved in digital stuff. That was our realm. And I happen to have gotten involved in the restaurant industry in a few clients. And I'd published some articles and spoken at the National Restaurant Association. So he calls me up and he says to me, hey, any chance you can meet me in Chicago? And I said, well, I'm down here in Mexico, but what do you need? He says, they're meeting with the CMO, the chief marketing officer, and they want us to help them understand digital opportunities. And, you have that great background from when you did consulting. So I said, you know what? Yeah, all right, I'll fly up and I'll meet you. So I did a little homework, and I had thought about, this is now 10 years into the internet. The internet was in 94. This is about a decade later, 2004. And I looked on McDonald's website and I focused on Happy Meal because that's what this company did. They literally made the little Happy Meal toys. And I thought, well, what are they doing on the digital side? And I went to happymeal.com and I got an error. When you have 404 error, page 1. So I thought, well, that's weird. Like they obviously have a web page. They didn't have a web page. They owned the URL, but they didn't have the web page. So I wrote a proposal on happymeal.com, a destination website for moms and kids. And I show up in Chicago. My colleague is being introduced to the Chicago office as the new chief creative guy. And I'm in a little office, like a closet type office, just writing away and fleshing out these ideas and a couple others. Then we go and we meet with McDonald's chief marketing officer. And he has us on his side of the table as some agencies are pitching him ideas for digital. And then the three of us go back to his office and he says, what do you think? And we said, well, they're okay. They're not nothing blowing us away, but it was all right. He says, well, what do you guys think we should do? And I said, well, pull up happymeal.com on your browser over there. He pulls it up and he gets an error and he kind of mumbles under his breath, IT, da, da, da. And I said, no, this is not IT's fault. This is your fault. He says, excuse me? I said, this is your fault. You're missing an opportunity. You're squandering a huge opportunity. He says, what do you mean? And I said, this should be a destination website for moms and kids, right? And I went into a little detail, not much, a few sentences. And he says, you know what? I love this idea. Do you have more thoughts on this? And I said, absolutely, we do. And he says, I'd love to, have a broader discussion about it. Can we get together again? So he said, sure. We'll put together everything in writing and we'll get it to you and then we'll follow up. He says, amazing, great. And we had another couple ideas that we did for older age kids. And I leave. We write it all up, my colleague and I leave to go back to Mexico. And he calls me like a week later and he says, hey, I have good news and bad news. I said, what's the good news? He says, McDonald's wants to buy 2 of the 3 ideas we've thrown their direction. I said, oh my God, what an amazing way for you to start your new career. That's awesome. I'm so excited for you. He says, well, here's the bad news. Nobody in this agency knows anything about digital. I need somebody to come in and help manage it in the US. And build out a whole digital infrastructure in this company. So I was like, okay. He says, yeah, I need you to do that. I was like, oh, I get it. Long story short, I left Mexico and went back north, and I became the person who built the digital agency within this premiums agency is what they were called. And the major project we did was we launched happymeal.com for McDonald's. And it still exists today. It's got millions of visitors today. If you go and look at the experience on the site, it is much upgraded from what we were able to deliver 20 years ago. But it is pretty much the same experience we built out 20 years ago happening today.
That's amazing. That's really cool. I love that story. So so you went back to, you were in Chicago. Is that where you went?
So I would travel back and forth between the Bay Area, where I'm housed, and that's where I'm based, to Chicago. I would go there mostly every week in the beginning, and then it became every other week. And I was there for about 3 years, and they wanted me to start traveling globally. And I said, I can't do it. I've done that too much. I will hand this over to a colleague who took on the role of administering that delivery on a global scale into different regions of the world. That was what they wanted, in the different various McDonald's regions of globally. And so I left that, and then I decided, I consulted for about a year and change, and then in 2009, my now ex-wife worked in large corporate enterprise, and one of her colleagues was the president of SAP America, who had stepped down and out of the business. And the 3 of us got together, and he wanted to create a startup of some sort. And I was a startup guy, so I just kind of was hanging out, listening to the discussion between really the 2 of them. And then I would chime in. And well, long story short, he and I ended up bringing in a third partner, starting a mobile business, a mobile technology business. This is where mobile in 2009 was just starting to dip its toe into enterprise. And there was a lot of concern. And him being a huge enterprise guy, the other partner being a big enterprise guy, and me being a scrappy entrepreneurial guy, we just all jumped in and created a business. What I realized in that time was very quickly we would clash just in philosophies. He was a big corporate guy. I was a scrappy entrepreneurial guy. We just had different like world views of business. And so we didn't get on well, but I got invited a couple of years into it. I really fell in love with the subject of mobile technology and how can this new emerging mobile technology really bring great business benefit. That's always been the intersection I operate at. Is I'm not quite a tech guy, but I am interested in how tech and business intersect. And so that was the philosophy for me. And then in a couple of years into that, I decided to step away. I wasn't getting on well with my partner. He went back to large enterprise, and I got recruited to the largest company I've ever worked for, called Cognizant, a large systems integrator. And they were starting a mobile division to help enterprise clients figure out what this new world was, going to mean to them. And I was asked to step in and start and manage that division globally for Cognizant. So that was an exciting step back into large corporate, which I did for about 2 years. We built it up to almost an $80 million a year business. It was a good business. I mean, Cognizant was a multi-billion dollar revenue. So it wasn't like a big business within Cognizant, but it was a big business otherwise. And when I had a transition of bosses, my boss got promoted. He was doing very well. And as part of his promotion, he had to turn over the reins of my division to another colleague. And he and I did not see eye to eye. And I made the decision to step out. And at that time, I tried one more time with another systems integrator. Didn't work out. And I just said, I'm going back to startups. I just want to go help other founders. And so in 2015 now, I became the co-founder of a company called The Battery. And we're currently in our batch 18. In fact, that's a new type of batch for us, which I'll explain in a moment. But Battery was essentially about 40 different angel investors all pooling funds together to start an acceleration and co-working space for founders. And I loved that because it gave me an opportunity to share my experiences as a startup guy, as a tech guy, as a strategy marketing-ish kind of guy to other founders. And I realized at that stage of my life, I was touching up close to 50 years old. And I thought, maybe I'm just going to be better off helping other founders achieve their dreams than starting another thing myself. Now, I still start other businesses, but I'm part-time in those businesses. I'm full-time in my acceleration work. And Battery, just earlier this year, 4 of the partners acquired it from the rest of the group, and we've relaunched an AI-focused accelerator. So our batch 18 is our first batch under an AI curriculum. It's called Pragmatic AI, and it's helping companies understand the opportunities and implications of AI for themselves. And then in 2018, backing up a bit, we saw that we were seeing a lot of founders from all over the world that would make the trek to Silicon Valley. It's like Mecca for founders, right? For entrepreneurs. And I kept thinking the same thing when they were interviewing to come into our accelerator at the Battery. I kept thinking, gosh, I wish you were a little further advanced, a little further along. I could have made this trip that you've taken from your home country. And I'm talking like dozens of countries people would show up from. Silicon Valley is like that. And I just felt like I wish you could have accelerated at home. And I was sitting with a South African entrepreneur. He was just an amazing guy. I'm still friends with him now, very good friends with him now. And I pulled my mobile phone out of my pocket and I said, if you have one of these, it's kind of like having Silicon Valley in your pocket. No matter wherever you are in the world, if you're connected, you can access the techniques, methodologies, and practices that Silicon Valley companies use to foster and grow great startups. And long story short, that gentleman put his business on the back burner and co-founded Silicon Valley in Your Pocket with me to create a virtual acceleration platform to help founders where they are, rather than founders from all over the world, mustering up enough, financial resources to get themselves to Silicon Valley in hopes of achieving the entrepreneurial dream. And so to date, we've worked with over 3,000 founders across 40 different countries. It's been an amazing journey. I've gotten to meet so many innovative and creative people. I'm still friends with that founder, although we brought in one of my co-founders of the Battery as our third partner. And then the gentleman from South Africa, he got married, moved to the East Coast, and began doing some other things professionally. Still supporting founders, but in different ways. So, but Silicon Valley in Your Pocket, as I said, still lives on, serving the needs of mostly now governments and universities and chambers of commerce, trade associations for various countries. I'm heading, for example, in a couple months, I'll be in Baku, Azerbaijan. Recently, one of my more recent trips was to Kazakhstan. We work in the Republic of Georgia. Like, we work in a lot of off the beaten track kind of places to support founders and who are eager to pursue their own entrepreneurial dreams.
That's amazing. Now, did the battery like turn into Silicon Valley in your pocket, or are they two separate?
Battery serves individual founders, so we market to founders, whereas Silicon Valley in your pocket serves these larger organizations. Like, we're doing a program now in Austria with the government to support the startup ecosystem. So Silicon Valley in your pocket serves a different audience. Ultimately, we're working with founders, but our clients, if you will, are these other organizations.
So you're still involved with both, or they're separate organizations.
Yes.
Now, do they both? Now, the Silicon Valley in your pocket can be virtual, right? Or is it the batch?
It is built virtual. Yeah, okay. It's entirely virtual. And it was intended to, from the very beginning, we were probably one of the very first purpose-built virtual acceleration programs using Silicon Valley techniques, so that founders somewhere in pick any corner of the world could access what's going on in Silicon Valley without having to spend resources they really don't even have to get to Silicon Valley.
Yes, which is amazing. And now is the battery, did they adopt that model as well, or is it still more like in person?
Well, when COVID hit, the battery went virtual, as did everybody else. In fact, we in Silicon Valley in your pocket, we started looking around going, where did all of you people come from? Because we didn't have this much competition in the virtual sense before. Then COVID hit, everybody virtualized. And so we pivoted away from being what I would call a B2C company, the C meaning the entrepreneur. That was how we marketed. We then pivoted towards these organizations, universities, trade groups, et cetera. And governments. So Silicon Valley in your pocket pivoted in COVID away from the virtual to the founder, and battery moved into virtual to the founder. So it was kind of a funny swapping of places, if you will.
Interesting. So can maybe you walk me through, or some of us trying to get the concept, maybe a simple use case of one of your clients with Silicon Valley in your pocket, like kind of how it works.
Absolutely. So we're doing a program right now for, I said, we're doing something with the Austrian government, something with Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. Most of these are either the governments themselves, kind of like a chamber of commerce or an economic development entity within a government that wants to catalyze their startup ecosystem and start getting investors, building even angel networks. Sometimes we are asked to help train, angel investors on how to do proper due diligence, what to look for. Other times we train the trainers, meaning we're kind of training up a mentor network, because that can then provide sustainable support for the ecosystem of startup founders. And then, of course, we train the founders. So it's three legs to the stool, right? You need the founders, the coaches and mentors, and the investors. And we kind of work across that spectrum to help them get those things going. So we'll often do programs that might include some double-digit number of founders. Sometimes it's, in the low double digits, like 20 founders, and sometimes, you'll get programs into the few hundred even founders. A lot of times what will happen is a group may say, we want to open up an application window for founders to come into our program. And that might include hundreds of applicants. And then we help them filter that down to what we'll call a higher probability subset. Then we'll send in a team to do some training in that country, whatever the country may be. Do that for maybe a week to 10 days, do a training in person, get to know the founders, probably then filter that down a little further to those that perform very well during that in-person, period of time. Provide remote mentoring and coaching for them for a period of months, usually. 3 months is kind of typical. And then filter that down and bring the subset that's even much smaller to the US for an immersion in Silicon Valley and introductions to Silicon Valley resources. Those are mostly for companies that have a desire to open up market opportunities in the US. Not every company does have that, nor should they have that desire. But for those that do, that's a very common track that we go down.
Got it. So at each stage, you're providing value and benefit to the founders at various levels and degrees, and then just like you said, filtering it down, the ones with the most potential, you're bringing them along to the next stage. And you may have just said this and I missed it, but how do you find the founders? Does the B2B part, let's just say you have this relationship with the Australian government, did they bring founders to you, or do you also market to founders yourself?
Mostly in that example that I described, the entity that hires us has a group of startups in their ecosystem that they want to put through a program. So they generally bring founders to us. That said, we've worked so broadly at this point that we often get reached out to by founders from all over the place, for either an individual kind of opportunity or for joining a program. And sometimes we'll refer a founder that finds us through Silicon Valley in Your Pocket, we'll refer them now over to Batchery. Because we'll say that program is more geared to help you as an individual founder, as opposed to a government entity hiring us to come, do an acceleration program for 25 founders or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you have that cross benefit there. Oh, yeah. There's an artificial sun coming down on you. So you're bringing Silicon Valley to the world, is what it sounds like to me.
We always say we're exporting the best and brightest and best techniques and methodologies of Silicon Valley. We describe Silicon Valley as a mindset, not a geography, even though we're aware it's a geography. We think of it as you could be a Silicon Valley style company anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very interesting. And you just, this is relatively new, right? It's been, about a year or so?
Silicon Valley in Your Pocket launched in 2018.
Oh, okay. It was 2018. Okay. Got it. Okay. So I see. So now you've got 6-7 years of traction under your belt, and you kind of got the process down. You know what you're doing. It sounds like you've expanded into many countries across the globe at this point.
That's definitely. It's amazing. If you had asked me if I had visions of this being the outcome, it took a long time for me to ever imagine this was really what was happening for us. It was amazing, the breadth of reach, and that's the beauty of online, right? Online, you can reach everybody. So we reach so many people. I just did a session this morning for angels and founders and other VCs. It was a widely, I think there were a couple thousand founders and investors on it. And I did a 10 to 15 minute presentation on a topic for investors and founders. And I must have had several dozen invites on LinkedIn, right? Just to connect, and from all corners of the planet. That's what's amazing to me, is the reach of these programs now online is just astounding.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's not just online, right? You're getting to know people from all over the world, but then you're traveling to these countries. From what I understand, you've relocated out of the United States. You're truly a global citizen.
I've become a little bit of a digital nomad, I guess, without realizing it, but I have. I do reside half a year in New Zealand, where I'm talking to you today from. But I also travel all over the place. I think I mentioned earlier, I was in Kazakhstan late last year. I'll be in Baku, Azerbaijan in a couple of months. Numerous places elsewhere other than those kinds of, but those are the kind of off the beaten track places that have been recent travels for me.
That's really exciting. That is not, not many people get that opportunity. And so that's just really interesting. So what's the next steps with Silicon Valley on Your Pocket and with Batchery? Like what's your future plans?
We're building a really amazing set of tools in Silicon Valley in Your Pocket. And, we lend a lot of the technologies we've built and tools we've built in Silicon Valley in Your Pocket over the years to the Batchery. Now that there's 4 of us that are at the helm and redoing it with an emphasis on artificial intelligence, we're lending a lot of the tools that we've built to the Batchery as the program refocuses its content. And similarly, the AI orientation that the Batchery is focused on is going to help Silicon Valley in Your Pocket. So we know we're going to continue down the path of leveraging artificial intelligence and using it to build just a continuous growing set of tools to help founders, including ourselves. We're going to continue building tools to help us be more effective and efficient in our own business.
Sky's the limit. It's so exciting. So, well, I definitely I'm grateful to be associated with you so that we can follow this journey and maybe even have you on another podcast at some point to get an update. So tell me quickly, how did you meet Tech 387? How did you meet us?
I met you through a founder I was working with in the music space who found you guys through someone else. And I got brought into the shuffle and met yourself and some of the team over in Sarajevo. And yeah, just stayed connected online and just like what I was seeing, and just happy to be connected to you guys. I'm always looking for great resources anywhere I can find them that can help my ecosystem of founders. So I probably made lots of referrals. I probably will continue making referrals where I think the skill sets you guys at Tech 387 bring to, the development side of the world and more to the founders that I work with, because there's, we pull out every stop when we're trying to help a founder, and that's introducing them to every great resource we can. And that's Tech 387 too.
Well, yeah, we are very grateful to have met you, and I know that you and Arslan, one of our business partners, hit it off right away and have stayed in touch over the years. And we are just very grateful to have this relationship, and for you to, come out and speak to our audience like this was a huge benefit. I think there's a lot of value that you could bring. You could probably write a book, honestly. I think that's something you should consider one day.
With AI's help, maybe. I don't have the time.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Well, that was, really my goals were just to really share your story with everyone and hope that they could get some value and some lessons out of that. And is there anything else that you wanted to kind of share?
No, listen, I think you've brought out a lot of my story, which I appreciate. The way the conversation was just very, straightforward and simple, smooth flowing. So I appreciated that. I guess my lessons, I hope they're lessons for others. I really do. The one thing I always tell founders is ignore the no's. There'll be a lot of people naysaying and telling you your idea isn't a good idea for X, Y, and Z reasons. Just ignore them. If I listen to everybody who said you're never going to be able to get teachers to go online and do this, you're never going to be able to reach Steve Jobs and get to Apple, you're never going to be able to write happymeal.com. If I listened to people who said that, I would never have done anything that I've done, because there was naysayers along every single step of the way. I have a philosophy that I'll prove for myself if they're right or if I'm right. And I'm not going to take their word for it. If they say it's a bad idea, maybe it is to you, but maybe it doesn't mean it's a bad idea for me, and I'm still going to pursue it. And you know what? Sometimes they're right and it doesn't turn out the way I hope, and sometimes I'm right. And so if I were to leave a founder with a message, I would say, just keep pushing. Just absolutely keep pushing. If you have belief, keep pushing. Let your belief be your energy and keep pushing. Don't let anyone else change your direction or your mind. Prove it to yourself one way or another.
Love it. Great advice. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Jeff, where can people follow you or reach out to you if they, where can they find you?
Definitely a LinkedIn guy. In fact, I now have to remove people from my connections in order to add other people to my connections. I'm tapped out. LinkedIn has a ceiling of 30,000 connections. Followers is different. You're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn. I would happily invite that. So I'm all over LinkedIn. It's truly the only major social platform that I participate on, and I think of it more as a business networking platform than a social media platform. But please, I encourage you to follow me there. You're welcome to go to batchery.com. BATCHERY, like a batch of cookies with an ERY on the end of it. So batchery.com or SiliconValleyInYourPocket.com. You're welcome to find me at any or all of the above.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff Wallace, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and wishing you the best in these next couple years. And we're excited for you. And thank you for your time.
It's been my pleasure chatting with you. I appreciated it. Really enjoyed just getting a chance to chat with you today. So thank you for inviting me and having me here.
Absolutely. This is the Tech Room podcast signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.